Hi guys, welcome to Pax Europiana, the podcast about peace in Europe. This is me in the Ukrainian Vyshyvanka, it's called, the traditional Ukrainian dress. We are here some days after the National Day, 30 years of independence of Ukraine. Behind me the NATO flag, and that symbolizes Ukraine join NATO. This is my message at this video, and I will explain how, why, and why it's very urgent. And this is very timely moment because we have now the president of Ukraine, Mr. Zelensky. President Zelensky will meet President Biden in the White House on the 13th of August, a long-awaited meeting between the president of the free world and the president of the one frontier state, which is in the center of the global storm since 2014 and since the annexation of Crimea, the illegal annexation and the start of the Donbass war, and the decision of the Ukrainian people to go west to sign the deep and comprehensive free trade agreement, and the events from 2013 to 2014, the so-called Euromaidan revolution, and the decisive moment in today's the world's history, I would say, because it was really a very decisive event and series of events which led to the decision of the Ukrainian people to join the free world and the West in a sense. And I will explain in this video why actually we are in a very decisive moment again with the fall of Kabul, what it happened, and why it's very important to do now in Ukraine all the things I say since 2017 and they are not done. And this is really very urgent because let's up the ante a bit. This year started extremely badly for the West. It was an enormous buildup of military forces on the Russian-Ukrainian border. You remember? This was the way Putin blackmailed himself into the meeting with Biden in Geneva in June. There was a lot of talk about America is back and the United West, how strong we are, but in reality we are not so strong. Because what we do against hundreds and thousands of troops at the Russian-Ukrainian border? Pretty little. And so what we try, of course, is then to conclude Nord Stream 2 in order to buy off Putin and to make him a stakeholder in our success, so in order that he doesn't invade us. But does that really save Ukraine from further aggression in the case of it? How fast we can mobilize troops from America to the Ukrainian-Russian border in case? Yeah? We don't even have the highways or the railway connections necessary to do that. Yeah? We are getting better, but it's still major obstacles, as there's a lot of talk about that one as well, that we need military interoperability. So in reality, we have a really bad year. America is back, Europe is back, we have the commission running, but to my best knowledge, I made this kind of specific calculations. What is the success of America is back? And what is the success of 2 years of the Ursula von der Leyen and Charles Michel Commission? And this period since 2019, since we have the new institutions, until 2024. Honestly, the balance sheet is rather not so good. And now we come to the moment where Russia and China do see and their time has come. Why? The fall of Kabul has further undermined the trust into the Western strength. Of course, it was probably long overdue and long negotiated already. But the way it was done and the way the speed, the lightning speed, the Taliban, with the help of all their masters from Russia and China and with their own logistical possibilities and the lack of our withdrawal, the speed of our withdrawal having undermined the Afghan government, obviously the chaos at the airport, every day the television pictures, not so good. Additionally, the whole corona crisis, additionally, obviously, and the internal divisions which we have. So we don't make the strongest impression to the world. So if Russia makes another military buildup, what we will do? Another pipeline, another big summit, sacrifice another country like whatever, Iraq or the eastern Syria, where we still have forces, just to show the world that we are even weaker. So we are in a big, the idea that we are back in strength is now we have this European politicians in front of the German elections, then the French elections in May 2022, then the midterm elections in the United States, yeah, and all this kind of paralysis ahead of it. So while we have some internal kind of progress, the EU has done the first big debt increase, the 750 of the recovery fund, and Biden has done now the third major multi-trillion package of infrastructure, debt recovery from Corona, and there was a third one, I think, as well, or it's coming. I lost the track. Okay, we can add a lot of debts, but who will be impressed? I mean, no. And we have helped a little bit Ukraine as well and the Balkans, but not very significantly. And when we come to the next major crisis, where there can be easily a challenge, yeah, and towards the status quo in Ukraine, which is already very unsatisfactorily the status quo, because two parts are already occupied. But Russia is in every position to claim more land or to escalate further or to somehow shake the fundament of the West with a threat of further aggression. And now Ukraine has to listen very carefully in that moment when it comes to the meeting with Biden. And what I propose is very serious. Yeah? It is, in my view, the only way which is really feasible. I made a specific video already about the repetition of the Western German situation after World War II. And here again, the slogan and the motto and the guideline is division is better than defeat. It's very hard, this line, to accept for any proud patriot of Ukraine. But I really love Ukraine and I love the Ukrainians and I want to help, yeah? Because they fight for freedom in 2014, and I respect it, and also in 2004, by the way. But it's very important now to be smart and not to be proud and, to be complicated and, just to think about, national unity. That is very good theoretically. But practically, that is at the moment, unfortunately, impossible as long as Russia has nuclear arms. So we have to be very smart, I think smart is maybe not the right word, but really to take the opportunity when it arises. When Biden now offers NATO membership and a map, it has to be accepted. But the price obviously is not to talk every day about Crimea, not to talk about Donbass every day. It must be frozen, this conflict. It is very hard, of course, to have a scenario like the GDR for the BRD. This is very difficult because most of them, they think always in terms of the 70s. But there was a different status for the GDR before. And Western Germany never recognized Eastern Germany, not until the end. Never. The last visit even of Honecker to Germany in 88 or 89, he was not received as a guest of state. Yeah? And so it's not necessary to, neither the annexation nor the occupation of Crimea and Donbass, nothing of that has to be accepted legally. But there has to be frozen. This must be borderization. And then on the precedent of the Western German accession in 55, Ukraine can join NATO. And then it's safe. Because the NATO alliance is very important for the Americans. They will not breach any of that. And now also after the shocks which we have faced, I think the German and also the French vetoes, which we had still the problem in Bucharest, they will not be repeated. If the Americans really want it, and the Ukrainians are ready for that. And that is the first very important thing. The second point is that Ukraine also must recognize Kosovo and also then to join all these institutions, best simultaneously, of the Southeastern European Reform Mechanism. That is obvious, and also then be in the process a EU potential candidate country together with Georgia and Moldova, like Bosnia and Kosovo. But be a pro-European reform country in the structures of the Regional Cooperation Council, of CEFTA, of the Central European Free Trade Agreement, and obviously all the other organizations like the Energy Community, Ukraine is already member, Transport Community, Regional Center Against Corruption, and all the other 15 organizations I have outlined in the last years, and Andreas Umland in the article in the European Council for Foreign Relations and in the Atlantic Council. I made the case now since 2017, and this must happen now. And also the EU potential candidate status, and also the recognition of Kosovo, to show to America that Ukraine is a full ally and will be not a second Romania, and not just import its own broken kind of crisis status into the EU, because nobody will reconquer Crimea for Ukraine, and Ukraine will not do it, because you are a client state of America now, and not an independent power which can dominate the world and Europe. No, there is no reconquista. There will be no kind of military solution in Donbass and in Crimea. If there will be one, it will be Ukraine's to lose, and Russia's to win. And nobody will help Ukraine. But there will be similar events like Austrian foreign minister going to Kiev and saying Crimea should be Ukraine and joining the Crimean platform. Yes, and 2 days later he comes to Vienna to kiss the ring finger of Lavrov here. And Lavrov is kind of welcome to Vienna like a conquering hero and telling everybody off, you guys, you joined the Crimean platform, that's not good. And everybody shell-shocked. I mean, that's the level of support Ukraine will get in the case of war. Let's not fool ourselves. And also Biden, after his performance in Afghanistan, I don't think he will roll out the US army to Ukraine's protection in case of war, if you are not in NATO. And you cannot join NATO with this kind of fiction of national unity as the most important priority. It has to be excluded from the defense parameter, Crimea and Donbass. No, we are not a Reconquista organization in NATO. I'm not the official representative again, but I want to make it very clear. It's a defensive alliance. It's not a forward kind of aggressive pact. It's a defensive alliance with clear parameters to defend. So if Ukraine has this kind of border issues and it's not ready to smooth them, then it will not be possible, and then you are alone. Okay, maybe the Americans will send some money and some weapons. Now they have even sent 1 billion to Lukashenko. So yes, some billions will come in case of war. But there will be a very lonely situation. And there will be no European or American soldiers fighting with Ukrainian soldiers on the battlefield of eastern Ukraine or anywhere else in case of war. So that must be very clear. And so it must be very, very clear in the decision makers that there is no illusion. Otherwise, then they will say, oh yeah, and unity is so important for us, it's more important than NATO membership. Because here's the trade-off. It's either unity or, no, actually, let's make it very clear, unity is not an offer. It's either the unrealistic wish of unity blocking NATO membership, or it's coming to concede more or less temporarily defeat, accept division, and join NATO. And that's very painful, I know that. But it's absolutely necessary to make the choice and to understand it. It was very painful also for Adenauer in Germany. For example, the Cypriots didn't do it. They didn't join NATO at that time. But they also had no kind of situation in a sense, and they were somehow supported by the Greeks to move in to the EU at the Big Bang enlargement of 2004. You can of course say you should also do it like the Cypriots. Find your allies who are so powerful to do that. I don't think they exist. And the Baltic states and and Poland and Slovakia, they are much too concerned about their own security, that they will make a similar mess like Greece made it for Cyprus. Very honest. And so this is the way forward to do it. And now we have this kind of enthusiastic week with the Crimean platform, where it's very important to do it, to keep the flame alive and to keep free Crimea as a topic. Yes, very good. But let's not have the illusion that this is really possible. And it's not. There is no will from Russia, and it's in a way it's a nuclear power with big power status. And there will be no withdrawal from Crimea, nor from Donbass. Look, so that's the way, and that's important. If Ukraine doesn't do it, and then doesn't and the things continue like this, sooner or later there will be a lot of decision makers coming on the idea that Russia is right and Ukraine is the problem because there is no movement there. And then gradually the whole idea of having UN missions, anyhow I proposed it already and was a big debate, yeah. And then from UN mission also could be the options of independence of Crimea and of Donbass, yeah. Similar, let's say, like Montenegro or like Kosovo in the case. That could be also an idea many people get by over time when there is no settlement. Because as I see now the situation, if you read the Afghanistan signs very clearly, foreign entanglement, as it's called in the constitutional of the United States, yeah, seem to be very unpopular now in America. So get somebody the idea that this would be the better way to offer to independent states, to Russia and Ukraine, and then suddenly you will be all not in NATO, and you have lost them permanently as independent states. And? Is that something you want? I don't think so. But in the case of Crimea, the case for independence, like an Austrian scenario, like after Anschluss there is independence and neutrality, that some people could have this idea. It's not excluded in the thinking. Dissolutions of countries have happened, like Yugoslavia, like Soviet Union, and somebody could have this idea. And I think it's not what most Ukrainians want, and especially not what the elite wants. But the more there is unclarity, and Ukraine is not choosing the NATO scenario, the recognition of Kosovo scenario, the joining of the Southeastern European structures, and somehow determines its future itself by all these choices to be a full member of the West. And then all these other scenarios, yeah, either to keep Ukraine as the permanent buffer state between Russia and Europe, many people in Europe want that, yeah, or to have Ukraine some kind of permanent association situation like Turkey, some people want that. Or also to make peace on the cost of a united Ukraine and keep Ukraine somewhere in the buffer and make Russia the offer to legalize the situation with two more independent states, and then also with neutrality and annexation interdiction. That's anyhow not what Russia wants at the moment, because they like the status quo at the moment. But people could then offer such a choice, and that would be then whatever discussed by the big powers over the head of Ukraine, and you wouldn't be very pleased with that one. So what I call, again, and to make it very clear, Ukraine has now, at the end of the summer, after all these very difficult moments, they had the high with the 30-year celebration and also with the invitation to the White House and the Crimean platform. But don't overplay your hand and don't somehow go with swollen chest around and think that the world is waiting for you. No, it's not exactly like that. On the contrary, the cards for Ukraine are very complicated right now. And it would be much better to again do, as I advised since 4 years, it is exactly in the same cadence like the BDR, the Federal Republic of Germany, the Western German state, has started its westward integration. With the currency, Western Germany has adopted the German mark back to the US dollar in 1948. That led to a crisis with Russia, and they escalated, and then the West was drawn further in, and then there was the airlift in Berlin, America fully committed to the freedom of West Berlin and of West Germany, and then the creation of the European Union with the Schuman Declaration, and of course the Marshall Fund summits in Paris, and with the European recovery, and then the NATO summit and the NATO creation in 1949, and then also the membership of Western Germany in NATO in 1955. And here again, I call for Ukraine to adopt the euro in free Ukraine, not in Crimea, obviously, not in Donbass. They can do what they want in the occupied territories, or adopt the ruble. Who cares? Yeah. The thing is, it is not under your control. It's not Ukrainian territory in anything meaningful. It is poor people who are tortured by Russian occupation, and many of them who are there have probably accommodated with the situation. And if not, that's very sad, offer them to come to free Ukraine. It's quite easy. Resettle them in Zaporozhye or in one of the free parts of Donetsk or in any other part of Ukraine. Anyhow, millions of Ukrainians have left in the last years to Western Europe. So there's enough workforce required, there's enough apartments, or build new settlements. If they want to live in free Ukraine, they are very welcome. Like there were 3.5 million Eastern Germans moving to Western Germany before they built the wall. And so let the Russians build a wall at the demarcation lines. Yeah? But it must be very clear that there is a currency border, that's the euro on the one side, and the ruble on the other side. There is then also a customs border, that's the EU customs union on the Ukrainian side, and the Russian customs union on the Russian side. Yeah? And that goes via the border between Ukraine and Crimea and Ukraine and occupied Donbass. That's all very sad, but that's the reality. And that's also then the NATO defensible border. And as this is the first time and the last time I ever will say something about a wall, something positive, and let's build a wall. Or there is actually already a fence, yeah? And there is a fortification already. So let's fortify that line and let's make it NATO defensible. And that is all what needs to be discussed now in the White House summit between Biden and Zelensky. And that must be also implemented from the currency, from the customs, from the defense arrangements, and also then from joining the EU potential candidate country, the Americans promoting that, and also putting their diplomatic weight behind it in Europe, and also the membership in the Southeastern European Reform Councils. And that's the way forward. I'm quite confident all this will not happen, because it didn't happen the last 4 years, and Ukraine has made different choices under Zelensky and Poroshenko as well, and they will continue to insist on unity as a priority over NATO enlargement. So there will be no NATO enlargement, there will be no European enlargement, there will be further threats of Russia. So the most realistic scenario is that what happened in April and May this year will be repeated now in October, November, and further escalation is not excluded in the winter of 2021. And it will test the mettle of the West in this confrontation when we don't have a German government, we have France in elections, and we have Britain in confusion, and we have America in front of the midterm elections. And obviously Trump always as a Russian asset arguing the non-intervention, and Biden being very careful not to lose the Congress elections in November with a new war. And so the situation for Ukraine will be extremely difficult in the beginning of 2022 and even very complicated, I would estimate. And that is something which Russia will certainly use to its advantage. They will have the Nord Stream 2 pipeline online, so they will not need any kind of transit from Ukraine anymore. And they have also then the kind of Afghanistan victory in their books. Let's see how Syria and Iraq is developing, and Lebanon, and Libya, by the way, as well. So then there will be a lot of further minus points for the West and crises to tackle. And the appetite for talking the Ukrainians into compliance with the Russian request, yeah, will be very high. What you will see then? It will be then further provocations, aggressions, demands from Russia against Ukraine. And the Ukrainians will go to Washington and to Brussels and Berlin and ask for help. And everybody will say, you should really talk much better. You know, we had Putin here as a guest. He was very reasonable at the G20 summit. You are anyhow not in the G20. And you are very problematic for us and very expensive. And, you know, Putin really brings so much money and he is such a great guy and we had so fun and he speaks German and he may crack the joke. Yeah? And then, you know, guys, Ukrainians, why don't you give in and find some agreement with Russia? This you will hear from Germany, from Austria, from America, from France and from Italy in the coming years and weeks. And that is exactly then, because Russia will not put it to such an escalation where you can then say, oh, look, oh, no, no, no. This is very difficult times for Ukraine coming up. And it's partly self-inflicted. Because why? All the things which I recommended intensively since 4 years, CEFTA, Regional Cooperation Council, recognition of Kosovo, freezing of the conflict lines, joining NATO, EU potential candidate status, and so on, building alliances with NATO members like Macedonia, like Albania, like Croatia, all this effectively didn't happen. As well, nobody listened to me on the key issues of the currency and the customs union. Yeah, discussing about customs union, but then you found out that it's very complicated to do, because then you don't have control of the customs and you cannot be so corrupt anymore. Oh, then let's not better join the customs union. Oh, with the currency we don't have such control about the central bank anymore, and we always have to ask Brussels and Frankfurt. That's not so good, let's better be independent. So let's be independent, then be independent. Then you can take this flag off, yeah? Because it will not be, and the EU flag as well. And you have, with your own ignorance and arrogance, condemned your people and your country to decades and decades outside of NATO and EU, because you were not objectively, clearly discussing the strategic choices for Ukraine. And here, again, the Western German role model of Adenauer. And that's why I made 100 of these slides with Adenauer, Zelensky, explaining everything, how it was with Erhard. I made these interviews, but I have no effect on that one. I made all these things. But now, from now on, it's my sad estimation, the future of Ukraine will be very complicated, and Russia feels very much strong, and Ukraine will have very few friends, unfortunately. And that's very much the choices of Ukraine which lead to this very dire years to come. I don't hope my prophecy will be really fulfilled, because my hope, obviously, what I dream of European Ukraine is membership, is the Euro, is a NATO membership. And it's all possible. It's all doable. But in Kiev, they don't understand that, because they have a different set of priorities for themselves, to line up the pockets by the control of the institutions, and also then to have less kind of sovereignty restrictions, which basically NATO and the EU is, and the Euro and the customs union. And obviously they know themselves much better, and so they will be very lonely in the coming years. And that's a very sad future. So I make this video not to have it happen. I make this video to shake up some of the Ukrainian decision makers, and I hope that European Ukraine, these 37 good million people which are in free Ukraine, to join NATO on the role model of the Western German state. It was possible from the introduction of the mark to membership in NATO in 7 years, and that's, I hope, can be done much faster if the right decisions are taken in Kiev, and it's also well explained, and also then there's a consensus for NATO of free Ukraine only. Good. It's difficult. I know it's painful, but this is the situation as I see it, and so I call for exactly this reform way, and it starts very much with joining CEFTA, Regional Cooperation Council, and Ukraine. But of course, the only thing Ukraine can do itself, because they're all our membership questions, is to change the currency of Ukraine and to borderize the conflict lines. That's my call. Thanks a lot. All the best from Pax Europiana. Bye.